Thank you very much. Good to see a full house. I'm not sure whether any of you are going to spend money on your rape crops this year, but that's a debate for lunchtime, no doubt. I've called it 2012, this presentation, but it's very much taking stock of the last 3 years of the fungicide performance trials. We've got a fairly simple format. It's a little bit more, if you like, commercially orientated than some of the wheat work you've heard about, where we're just putting on single sprays to define activity against diseases. Here we've gone, if you like, semi-commercial by putting on 2 spray programs for Phoma and light leaf spot. Sclerotinia, we are a little bit edgy and just trying to go once and stretch the chemicals. So, I mean, part of what we're doing here is, I think, to identify some of the strengths and weaknesses of products. So we are trying to stretch the system to give you information that you perhaps wouldn't get in a tight commercial program. Here's the list. I'm not going to go through it. It's all in your pack. The Proline formulation in recent years has been the stronger one, so the rate has come down from 0.7 in the old work. They seem quite short lists. In the current work, we've been encouraged to put in more products than in the first phase, and to accomplish that, some of these treatments are standards from the first phase, and they're only in at full and half rate. So that's why in your handout a lot of the data is full and half rate and not a full curve, because we've just put them in at full and half rate. But the gaps that you don't see on here are the new chemistry that may or may not come through. So we do have the SDHI mixtures, we do have strobilurins coming through for winter use, but whether they reach the market is still a hurdle that's got to be met. So if you deal first with Phoma, and the primary data is really about Phoma A on the left-hand side. There is a little bit of data on Phoma B on the leaf phase, but you'll all know that we can't actually distinguish Phoma B in the stem from Phoma A, so we can't actually track by visual assessments exactly what Phoma B does in the stem, but we do collect a canker rating. To me, Phoma leaf spot is very much like yellow rust. You see it, you spray it, job done. You know, it's quite an easy target to deal with. It's all about timing and much less about products. And this is a summary about the last 3 years. Remember, we're working here with Katana, so we've got pretty good light leaf spot resistance, and we're taking out, hopefully, any complications with verticillium as well. So we're dealing with a fairly simple Phoma situation. For those of you dealing with other varieties, then of course when you come to look at the yield story, you may get bigger responses because light leaf spot is in your crops, whereas here it's of negligible importance. So if we look at that data, basically all the chemicals can give you very good control of light leaf of Phoma. This is assessed probably about 6 to 8 weeks after treatment. But in individual trials, you can identify significant weaknesses for poros there, the prochlorase is the active ingredient, and for half rate of the metconazole in Sunorg Pro. But basically speaking, if your timing's right and you wait 6 weeks or so, all the chemicals will do a pretty good job. It's not really about Phoma control on the leaves, it's about stopping the disease getting to the stem. That's what causes the yield loss. And I've divided up the last 3 years into the high year, of which 2011 was quite extreme. And in these cases, we were spraying at 100% plants affected at Boxford and 65% plants affected at Terrington. So we're in a situation, very high disease when we're spraying. Could we actually do a job? And the answer was yes, we could with the stronger products. So you'll see that Proline there, even 2 sprays at half rate, was actually doing a remarkably good job, getting down from cankers which were killing some of these plants there. The average index is 50, but Proline doing a good job. Prosaro sanction also doing a very tidy job. But the weaknesses in this sort of eradicant mode of Poras and Sunorg Pro are showing up there. But they have got down almost to an index of 30, which is about the level at which there probably isn't very much yield loss. If we look at the yield responses, I do have to indicate that we had particularly large responses at Terrington, up to 1.4 tonnes per hectare. Now, this is almost twice what we normally expect to see, so don't treat these figures as ones that you could necessarily achieve in your farm crops. 0.7 of a tonne, which is a heck of a lot of money these days, obviously, is what you could expect with a bad attack on a susceptible variety. Here you'll see the averages at full rate are averaging 0.9 of a tonne, but it is a little bit more than I think you could reasonably expect to get. Good news here that Proline at half dose was working as well as full dose. And where we're trying to kick into these high levels of disease and kick back, then there is a bit of a benefit here of going to higher rates. And we've been advocating in recent years that if you're trying to deal with a highly diseased crop, perhaps you should look at 3/4 rate. So there is a stretch here with high disease that may be certainly on smaller plants, you do need to go a little bit above high rate. But there's good news there in terms of good economics, good disease control. These products are very efficient. I think the more interesting scenario is to look at last year and 2010, where the cankers were very small by harvest. So we had a late epidemic and low canker severity. And I think there's probably encouraging signs here that we're still getting small positive effects out of these chemicals in the absence of yield-damaging canker. So there are other things going on there, and that's one of the complexities we probably still have more work to do is what are these chemicals doing exactly? And, it's perhaps quite surprising even to me that we've got an extra 0.2 out of some of these treatments by going from half rate to full rate in what is effectively a nil canker situation. So maybe there's something there that needs a little bit more work to sort out what's going on. I think in these sort of trials I'd have been tempted commercially to try and get away with 1/2 dose. But there is a little bit more there, a little bit of physiology on rooting perhaps, drawing out extra yield for you. Like leaf spot, you've all got a job to do here. This is a nightmare scenario and one that's proving very, very difficult to get to grips with. This is a leaf taken out of a crop at the end of February. If you're trying to get like leaf spot control with plants like this, you're not going to do a good job. So if we look at 2011, and I'm just using English data primarily because the Scottish severity has been quite low in the last couple of years, so I'm not using any Scottish data here. So you can see this is 6 weeks after treatment in the spring, early May, and we're looking at 10-11% light leaf spot severity on the leaves. So a moderate attack, but well established right the way through the canopy. And all these chemicals at full and half dose, our star chemicals, are all looking very much the same. If you look at the statistics, then you can just about tweak out a difference from Prosaro and Proline from the other two. But really, you're splitting hairs in what you would see in a commercial crop. And it's quite surprising, I think, that there's no response to full dose to any degree, and there's no response in yield either by going above half dose, with the exception there of the Poras. So that's 1 year. We go on another year to 2012. A little bit more disease last year, perhaps a rather more active epidemic in the spring. But again, a similar story. We can just about get a difference out of these different treatments with Prosaro at one end and Poras at the other. But it's really a disappointing level of disease control here, I think. And that's really probably a reflection of what you're seeing out in commercial crops. Yield-wise, okay, we've got rather more out of the Prosaro end than the Poras end, but nothing really to choose between the two dose rates. And if we average those experiments and look at the light leaf spot control over various assessments here, you'll see the response curve is flat pretty well from half dose. Now, occasionally we do see responses to higher dose, but it's really quite grim news this, that you can't achieve better light leaf spot control by pouring on more chemical. And I think the only way you can go is to actually think about another application, because what we've got is a tremendously long period from November through to March, and no fungicide is going to give you protection from November to March. And I think we do need an intermediate application. And that's really what I've summarised on here. I think for most of you, 2 sprays for Phoma is pretty robust, but you do need to think about PGR effects, so you wouldn't use metconazole on tiny plants, for example. For light leaf spot, I think the case is really get something on in the autumn. It may be a Phoma spray in any case, but have Christmas off, get out there in January and see what light leaf spot is doing early in the year, and be prepared to go early. If there's snow cover, okay, you accept defeat, but maybe we should be looking at an extra application there. Sclerotinia, this is fairly typical of what we're seeing in some of the Rosemont trials, the good general scatter of dead plants with mid-stem infection. I suppose this is our best out of the last 3 years, our best product comparison trial. If you look here, we've got 40% disease, and if you go all the way down to the Proline line, we're down at about 1%. So these are dramatically effective products if they're used at the right time. The one thing just to draw your attention to is we've had to omit the full rate of Textura treatment there because I think there was an application problem. But other than that, you can see there's a good stretch here. We've stretched the products, and under that condition, you can separate out the products. So Proline, as in the first 3 years, is a top performing for products. You can see the strobilurins a little bit off the pace where they're stretched. MBC in top thin there work very well at full dose. So there's a huge range of chemistry in there, and we've got huge yield responses out of here. Quite a narrow yield banding there, but we're getting over a ton a hectare out of all these treatments. So very, very cost effective if you're getting that level of disease. It wasn't such a clean-cut story in 2011. We ended up with over 60% Sclerotinia, but unfortunately we missed the first infection wave, which left us with 20% Sclerotinia across all the plots. So the black line there is the level of disease that went in before application. So if you look above the black line, you can't actually separate statistically any of the products. So in this case, we controlled the second phase, which is 40%, but all the products gave a rather similar performance. Okay, a little bit better at full dose than half dose in most cases. And if we try and look at what happened there, because we do need this interpretation to work out what's going on, these we think were the two. Just got in my. See if I go back a slide. Here's our flowering period. The green arrows are the two infection, or what we think are the two main infection events that took place in this site. So the first one here on the early part of May went on before application, so we couldn't eradicate that. The mid-flower timing, it did go on at mid-flowering, has been able to stretch into this heavy infection period in late May and early June. So that's where the 40% has come under fungicidal control. If you look at the full picture there were infection periods over in Hereford virtually every week. So this is what you've got to interpret in terms of your spray timing and your disease control efficiency. Where was the fungicide on, and did you cover all the infection events during flowering? We've had 4 years, as you'll 4 trials in the last 2 years with the dry times where we've had very little Sclerotinia. These are all sites with less than 5% Sclerotinia, so you don't expect anything in the way of yield responses. And it's come as something perhaps with a little bit of surprise that when we average these 4 trials together, we've actually got significant yield effects from 2 of the chemicals, full-rate Textura and full-rate Phelan. Now, both of these chemicals have PGR activity or drought effects. So Textura is a mixture of Phelan and metconazole, so it's a growth regulator. Phelan, from recent work we know, does have an effect on the plant under drought stress conditions. So here we've got droughty trials to some degree, but the other factor to look at, I think, is that these are very high yielding average yields. These are 5-ton crops. So I think there is a case here, even under low disease risk conditions, that some of these fungicides may be justified in their own right for yield improvement and yield enhancement beyond disease control. So you've got a dramatically wide range of chemistry there, wider than any other disease that you'll hear about today. Products and dose are important, particularly when disease pressure is very high. For Sclerotinia, I think we work on the basis of 3 weeks control, maybe a day or two longer, but not much more than that. So you will require 2 sprays if you're trying to protect the crop for 6 to 8 weeks during the flowering period. We are concerned from continental situation that Phelan may break down to fungicide resistance. So as part of your strategy, you do not want to be using single actives, whether it's MBC, strobilurins or SDHIs, more than once as single chemicals. So do think about tank mixing and diversifying. And of course, this is a lot of heavy work, pulling these rape plants out, pulling them apart. So I want to thank Fiona in Scotland, Faye Ritchie over at Rosemont, and Paul Gosling, who's been working very hard on the number crunching. Thanks very much.